Right on. Sup, I'm Hammer. First, I'd like to not thank you for hiring me because I just expect good things to happen to me without working for them. Second, I'd like to give you all a list of my trigger warnings.
What's a trigger warning?
Actually, bruh, asking me what a trigger warning is one of my triggers, bruh. I feel traumatized, bruh. And now I'm tweeting about you, bruh. And now you're trending, bruh. And now your life is ruined, bruh. And now you're fired, bruh.
Too many, SJWs are an insidious group. They are promoting their agenda throughout all of Western media. They are ruining your video games. They are ruining your television shows. They are ruining The Last Jedi. They are ruining Fantastic Four. They are ruining Superman. They are ruining Doctor Who. They are ruining Battlefield 5. In short, they really just want to ruin everything you've ever loved so they can shove token diversity down your throat to lord over you as morally superior. However, social justice warriors seem to just be a straw man for any element the right wing or classical liberals don't like. SJW is interchangeable with feminist, leftist, Marxist, anarchist, progressive. Pretty much any group who wants some sort of societal change falls into the SJW category. These groups may often share some principles, but to say a progressive and a Marxist all neatly fit into one box is extremely dishonest. The same way I would not necessarily put Republican and Libertarian in the same category, because I have taken the time to educate myself on how these groups differ and connect. I don't just make a straw man by combining smaller groups into one larger one. So where does the hysteria around the bogeyman of the SJW come from? Well, from my own experiences, there's always going to be a fringe group of people in any political alignment. For example, let us take feminists. Being a feminist should be seen as a good thing. Feminists want equality for women. I have my own problems with the Western feminist movement as a whole. I cannot stand how they will not criticise religion or other parts of the world that subjugate women far more than Western society. I believe the soft gloves they use on the Islamic community in Britain is pretty annoying, but on the whole, I know their views come from a good place. Are there extremists or more radical members? Of course there are. I remember in 2017, two incidents that particularly fed the anti-SJW narrative that also annoyed me. One was the criticism of Blade Runner 2049. The director, Denis Villeneuve, was labelled sexist because of the way the society in the film treated women. They were mostly android or AI commodities for exploitation.
Okay, it's ready. I hope you're gonna like it.
I told you not to fuss.
And yet, voila, bon appetit. I missed you, baby sweet.
Honey, it's beautiful.
Just put your feet up.
Although there were two women in authority positions within the LAPD and the replicant resistance. Blade Runner is a dystopia, a world gone awry. Villeneuve wasn't showing us his perfect vision of the world, he was showing us what we could become. He doesn't want it to come into fruition. Another example was when the first gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2 was released.
They are nested with sin. Free them.
In the clip, a high-ranking woman in a cult ordered the torture of two captured women, who eventually escaped and killed her and her male followers. But somehow, some feminists saw this as promoting violence against women, despite women largely being the ones ordering and carrying out the violence. The scene was brutal in another dystopian world, but again, it is a massive stretch to try and say either The Last of Us Part 2 or Blade Runner 2049 were actively promoting sexism. This type of feminism is emboldened by video game commentator Anita Sarkeesian, who runs the YouTube channel Feminist Frequency. Now, she is another person I thoroughly disagree with. In one infamous video, she claimed Hitman Absolution gave the player points for killing strippers in a strip club.
Players are then invited to explore and exploit those situations during their playthrough. The player cannot help but treat these female bodies as things to be acted upon, because they were designed, constructed, and placed in the environment for that singular purpose. Players are meant to derive a perverse pleasure from desecrating the bodies of unsuspecting virtual female characters.
The opposite was in fact true. In Hitman, the goal is to kill the target without being seen or killing others. It penalises you if you stray from the target. You can of course kill anyone in the strip club, including strippers, but in no way does the game incentivise you to do this. She was obviously making false claims to further her agenda. But Anita is on the fringe. Her channel only has 200,000 subscribers, way smaller than most of the anti-SJWs. But she is what the anti-SJWs would have you believe every other person on the left is like. Someone who will make up false claims to further their own agenda and try and shove diversity down your throat. To find another good example and to prove my point, let's take a look through history. In particular, let's take a look at the civil rights movement in America. The civil rights movement got into full swing after the end of the Second World War. Martin Luther King Jr., a student of the ways of Mahatma Gandhi, became its figurehead. He advocated for non-violent methods to draw attention to the severe difficulty of being African American in the United States.
And that is the one point that Gandhi was trying to bring out.
It seems to me that there are three ways that oppressed people can deal with their oppression.
What are they, Dr. King?
Well, one is to rise up in open violence, in physical violence, and some persons have used that method, persons who have been oppressed. But I think the danger of that method is its futility. I feel that violence creates many more social problems than it solves.
Martin Luther King was obviously slandered, attacked, and imprisoned numerous times. But up until his speech on April 4th, 1967, in which he came out against the Johnson administration's war in Vietnam, he was the politically acceptable face of the movement. While we have forgotten how radical he was, as he once said the actions of the US in Vietnam were comparable to those of the Nazis, most would agree he was tolerable to white Americans willing to help. In contrast to Dr. King, you have Malcolm X. He didn't agree with King's civil disobedience and said, "Be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, respect everyone, but if someone puts a hand on you, you send them to the cemetery."
That as long as a white man does it, it's all right. A black man is supposed to have no feelings. But when a black man strikes back, he's an extremist. He's supposed to sit passively and have no feelings, be nonviolent, and love his enemy. No matter what kind of attack, be it verbal or otherwise, he's supposed to take it. But if he stands up and in any way tries to defend himself, then he's an extremist.
For much of his political career, Malcolm X was open to black separatism, in which black people would separate from the US and form their own nation, or at the very least operate in their own communities without US laws, as white people would never treat blacks as equal. Now let me ask you a question. Would it be fair to paint the entire civil rights movement as a separatist movement? Do you think it would be fair to say you were anti-civil rights for African Americans because of Malcolm X? Do you think it would be incredibly dishonest to paint a mass movement with many different elements in one certain way? So why would you paint all leftist elements pushing for social change as SJWs, feminazis, or libtards? Why would you take the politics of fringe leftists or feminists and use them to paint a whole movement? Why would you try and make it seem that the views of Anita Sarkeesian represent the views of millions of progressives? You wouldn't, but the anti-SJWs don't think, they just react. Every attempt to bring societal change is just SJWs being emotional and trying to force you to accept their politics. I do not agree with everything that these groups are pushing for, but they usually come from a good place, even if the execution is not thought through enough. Changing the London Underground announcer from saying "hello ladies and gentlemen" to "hello everyone" may seem like political correctness gone too far, but you can't dispute the intent is to make everyone feel a part of society. This is similar to trying to make people use certain gender pronouns. Agree or disagree, it comes from a good place. Even if the ridiculous story recently about Manchester University wanted to ban clapping in favour of jazz hands to not trigger anxiety comes from a decent place. Most people, including forces of social change, would agree this is absurd, but again the morals behind it are sound. This is in complete contrast to many anti-SJWs. Many people in the anti-SJW camp are fine. I do not believe them to be bad people, whether it is Joe Rogan or Rich from Review Tech USA. They are just fed up with what they see as increasing political correctness. That is something indisputable that is happening, but it has been warped into something different. This is in no small part to anti-SJWs being made up of the far right and neo-Nazis who have all mixed in with the people who are pretty normal. Rather than being a movement against political correctness, it has become a movement against social change, just like the movement against civil rights. It is full of misogynistic, racist and homophobic elements who have hijacked the movement. They now usually support people like Donald Trump, Northbert Hoffa, Marine Le Pen, Tommy Robinson and Geert Wilders. People who would have been previously shunned as fascists are now seen as champions of free speech who are standing up to the SJWs, who would force diversity everywhere, including forcing more Muslims to settle in the West. Anti-Islam is also strong in the anti-SJW movement, but rather than being against the theology of Islam, it's usually a stand-in for being racially prejudiced against Arabs. What the anti-SJW movement has done is hijack a backlash against extreme political correctness perpetrated by fringes on the left and made it a movement against all forms of progressive change, helping refugees, accommodating transgender people, accommodating homosexuals, being tolerant of others' religion, speaking up for a change in women's rights. They abhor these things just as much as they hate Black Superman, a woman version of Doctor Who, or female soldiers in Battlefield 5. They have weaponized nerd anger at things they love being changed and use it to create a legion of people who hate all types of progressive change, from entertainment to real life issues. And through this, a lot of elements have come to prominence that would be unthinkable 10 years ago. That's how you can have Dave Rubin sitting down for a friendly chat with Britain's racists, and most people don't give a shit while he helps them rehabilitate their image. Overall, the anti-SJW hysteria is far worse than anything the SJWs have ever done. True, some elements of the left can be extreme, they can go too far with their political correctness, but ultimately, it is from a good place morally and isn't really representative of the wider movement for social change. The anti-SJWs have morphed from a group of people angered angered by political correctness to a full-fledged movement who will push back against most social change. It is a movement that has been hijacked by the far right and is now infested with racist elements, and has helped indoctrinate a new generation of nerds into a racist culture. While gamer culture has always had these elements, it has now been weaponized by the alt-right and far-right politicians and talking heads. This has led to anti-SJWs being a far more destructive force than SJWs could have ever hoped to be. So what did you guys think of that video? If you liked it, leave a like, comment and let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Instagram at @thecavernacle, also on Twitter. My WordPress is a similar name. Subscribe if you're new, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.